All before 9:30 a.m., talk show host and actor Mark Consuelos gave the nation a boost of morning energy upon confirming to live viewers that he wants his toddler son to Hooters. The Scream 7 star made the admission after wife and co-host Kelly Ripa jokingly asked him at the top of Wednesday's broadcast who he's going to date now that the last Hooters is closing in the Queens region of New York City. R.I.P. Hooters, the 54-year-old said as his wife and studio audience laughed. Those chicken wings, wow. Ripa then recalled that years ago, Consuelos and one other dad took their sons on a playdate to a shocking location. She admitted that, as moms, we were very alarmed. We were like, what are they going to do? What are they going to do with the kids? She continued, anyway, you guys walked in the house immediately smelling of cigarette smoke, stressing that the moment occurred a long time ago, as their son in question, Michael, is now 28 and was approximately 4 years old at the time. It wasn't my idea, Consuelos stressed, while Ripa doubled down, saying they took them to Hooters. Consuelos observed, the other father was a complete wild card. I wasn't driving, he was driving, explaining that the other dad said, we should take the boys to Hooters, to which he replied, really? All right. Ripa ended the couple's discussion about the memory with a final assessment. That was crazy, she said. Ripa and Consuelo's personal life together often comes up during their joint gig on Live, including earlier this week when actress and live interview subject Krista Miller inquired about Consuelo's previously expressed penchant for morning sex. There's no morning sex. No one likes it. And not even on the weekends, Miller told the couple. Consuelos replied, I've got to tell you, this job has really gotten in the way of that. It's been the antidote for it. In addition to the aforementioned Michael, Ripa and Consuelos, who married in 1996 after meeting on the set of All My Children, also share children Lola and Joaquin, whom they regularly speak about on the talk show. Live with Kelly and Mark airs weekdays in syndication. Check your local listings for showtimes in your area. They called it the Hooters incident for years afterward, not because it was scandalous exactly, but because it was the sort of story that lodged in family lore with a peculiar gleam of something ridiculous and somehow tender. It began, as many important tales do, with a dare and with very bad timing. Mark remembered it like a small photograph that had been overexposed at the edges. Bright sunlight, the smell of French fries and something older, sticky and smoky under it, the impatient chime of a car horn. He remembered laughing a lot, not because the joke was that good, but because he could feel the laughter as a kind of armor against the judgment that would later, inevitably, arrive in the form of shrugs and raised eyebrows from the two mothers who had stayed home that afternoon. He remembered the way his son Michael, tiny and trusting in the passenger seat, folded his knees up like a bird before he landed, watching the world through a window smeared with fingerprints. It had all been, in Mark's memory, an adventure that required the participation of someone else's bravado. The other father, a neighbor, a man with a grin the size of the Bronx, had been the instigator. Let's do something different, he'd said, as if the words were a key. Let's take them to Hooters. Mark hesitated for one heartbeat, then shrugged. He was not the sort of man who always made plans. He was the sort who loved the electricity of an idea and the sudden small rebellion of acting on it. The other dad drove. Michael fidgeted in the back and sang under his breath his toddler version of a pop song that would later become a million-dollar ringtone. Mark, who had always liked wings, thought briefly of the novelty, chicken wings at noon, the audacity of eating something so deliciously greasy and scandalously casual, and the way the neighbors' laughter would pull the afternoon towards storyhood. Kelly's memory of the day was sharper, the mother's clarity that reads like radar, the shriek of a phone when Mark and the other father walked in smelling of smoke, the amused, alarmed text messages from her who'd chosen the safer route that day, playgrounds and other mothers. She'd arrived to find a little boy with ketchup on his chin, a father who smelled like nicotine and hot sauce, and a grin that said apology and triumph in equal measure. That was crazy, she would later tell people, and the words settled like a punctuation mark in the family's running annotation of their life together. In hindsight, it was, of course, a small, ridiculous misstep. But at the time, their lives were braided into something that thrummed with spontaneity, working on set, early mornings, late-night rewrites, the tiny private rituals that kept two people tethered amid the bustle of public life. Morning coffee that tasted like ritual more than caffeine. A glance over the script. The way Michael, wide-eyed and moss-haired, would crawl under tables on set and emerge grinning like an impromptu magician. The story gathered detail over time. Each telling added color, the other father's suggestion, the way Mark had muttered, "Really?" And then, "All right." The smell of cigarette smoke became the smell of a city that had kept its vices close and polite. The wings became ceremony. The whole episode became an emblem of that moment when parenthood and foolishness collide and produce something real. Years later, when Michael was 28 and life had rearranged itself into new rooms, they would still break into that story. They would tell it at parties, between wraps of silverware, and the laughter of people who loved them, but who did not know the texture of their mornings. The story was a way to land back in the past and see the thin, bright stripe of what they'd been, younger, more reckless, more open to bad ideas with good punchlines. Kelly liked to tell it with a raised eyebrow, dramatic and slightly incredulous, while Mark would deliver the punchline with a wry shrug, as if the taking of his son to a place with beaded curtains and neon signs were the most natural thing in the world. It was a small, private myth. But myths have weight. They shape how you tell yourself who you are. For Mark, the Hooters incident was a lesson in limits and in the elasticity of memory. He had learned over time that some mistakes were simply educations in disguise. He'd learned to see the flash of guilt in his own chest not as a condemnation, but as a soft, workable thing, a nudge toward better decisions next time. Years later, after the broadcast lights and the scripts and the traveling tours that took him further than he'd ever thought he'd go, Mark walked into the kitchen one ordinary morning and found Kelly at the counter, scrolling through a news feed that announced, in the flat voice of the internet, that the last Hooters in their city was closing. "R.I.P. Hooters," he said, half joking, making a small theatrical funeral march with his spoon clinking the coffee cup. Kelly looked up. The studio audience in their house, the children, the dog, the plants, seemed to hold their breath. "Those chicken wings, wow," he added, and the sentence landed like a pebble in a pond, skimming memories. "Remember when you took Michael?" she asked. "All play now." But her eyes were curious. What else could you do when your life had been mostly public and your errors had been cataloged and stitched into entertainment? Mark laughed, but there was a flash of something softer. "It wasn't my idea," he said, remembering the father with a grin. He could hear the neighbor's voice again, a boyish tenor daring to turn a weekday into a small rebellion. Kelly's recounting of the incident would always include her own protective gasp. "As moms, we were very alarmed," she'd say theatrically, the word alarmed stretched like an elastic band. The audience would laugh. The laughter was a kind, communal recognition. We have all done things that make us waver between mortification and amusement. We have all been both the parent and the child, both the planner and the harebrained companion on a micro-adventure.